From these Billy Bauer pamphlets, I learned these 2-octave arpeggio. That was wrong. I'll do that again. There it is. It's 3-octave. Suspended, major, minor, diminished. I don't like playing them at all. I mean, there was a time when I played them a lot, but now I play them and I really hate them. I mean, I never use them when I'm playing music. To me, they're the epitome of an exercise, which is why I'm screwing it up, because I can't remember the last time I did them. But I used to concentrate on them because I thought, well, arpeggios, everybody has to learn how to play them, you know. And students would always come and ask me about them. You know, I kind of learn arpeggio, you know, and I say, well, why do you want to play it? And it was always, well, because, you know, people ask me if I know how to play them, you know. And I would practice an arpeggio later on if it was in a song. You know, I mean, like Cool Number 9's got this arpeggio, which is just a C minor arpeggio, and this Deep Purple thing, I used to do this. But it was really for effect, and when I'd slow it down for someone, I'd say, well, I'm doing this part, this, and then I'm going, and then I'm doing this, you know. And it was just for an effect, you know, so to me it didn't matter if I played it exactly or if I was doing it for effect, because to me, there is no value of one piece of music over another. There's no one scale that's deeper or heavier than another scale or more important, arpeggio or chord or anything. It's really, it has to do with the music and the composition. So that, you know, that one E chord to me is just as complex, you know, as a chord that has as many different notes as there are strings on the guitar. It's really when it's used in the context that gives it its power, its musical power. So the arpeggios are the same way. They're funny to perform, and sometimes they can be quite dazzling because people think that you're in some sort of accelerated musical mode when maybe you're not at all. You know, it's sort of like practicing the scale over and over again so you can dazzle your friends. You know, and play really fast, but it may have absolutely no musical power or value unless it's in the right context. It's totally annoying. But I did practice them. Not well enough, as you can see, but I go back to them now and then, you know. If I'm into it, I can get pretty good at it, but if I'm not really into it, I play really bad, you know. I've noticed that, which is not a good professional trait, but... What I liked was breaking the chords up, you know. This kind of stuff. To me, this was what really sounded like music. And Lenny Tristano had me do this thing where he would have me play every arpeggio of every chord in every possible position, in every key, everywhere on the neck, you know. And the idea was to get out of this thinking that G was always that, or that, you know, G major 7 was always that one voicey that you learned the first time. And it was really just an idea. Every chord is really an idea, and there's always an alternate. There's a note that comes before it or after it, or a group of notes that come before it. And Joe Pass put out a chord book many years ago that I thought was great. He would have, like, for C, he would have this, you know. He'd have all these chords, and he wouldn't tell you the names. It'd just be 4 pages of the key of C, and then the next one would be 4 or major, and the next couple of pages would be minor 7th sound, you know. And in there, for let's say D minor 7, he'd have minor 11th, minor 15th, every little bit of that kind of idea. And then when you went to play a song, he expected you to break every chord up, so that when somebody said E minor 7, you might go, and that would be, you know, minor 7th usually would be key of Dorian for a bar or two. So he'd say, well, do that instead of going, you know, E minor 7 over and over again. You know, play one of the things that are kind of part of minor 7. You know, and I was really impressed with it because that's what I heard every musician doing. They were playing things that you never saw in the chord books. What you saw in the chord book was that, a fret higher, and then a fret higher, and so on and so forth. The idea was to learn it in all the 3 ways on this group of strings, 6, 5, and 4, then go to the next one. This would be your next available group. Let's say we go to the next one, and you've got that, next one. And you do that, and then when you get in touch with minor, you have to adjust here. But it's a really interesting way of thinking about the chord because you really are breaking it down and getting out of this and this. So when someone says, you know, for the next 4 bars it's A minor, you may just come up with a, you know, you may come up with a part that involves anything but that. And I mean, I can relate it to, you know, you put on a corn record and you really don't hear people playing chords during the verses. Very often you'll have one guy going, you know, and the other guy goes, but they're playing A minor. It's just they figured out a really cool way of doing it with a couple of pedals. And then when the verse comes, you know, then they'll start playing the power chords. So there is a modern reference for it, let's say, that you'll hear on the radio today or see it on TV. The reference he was giving me back then was in the context of whatever music I was listening to, and plus his background as a bebop and jazz musician. And the idea that he had was to free yourself from always thinking A minor is done this way. That's idiomatic to him. Is then you're going to do this, you're going to strum it, and that's what everybody does. And you're a trained monkey. But if you look at A minor as a series of little groups of notes and all their little suspensions and extras in different keys, then you're really doing something. Then you have something to play around with, something to improvise and make up on the spot and be original about. Danny Tristano, he died in 1980, I believe, or 81. But yeah, he was known as the father of cool jazz. He was the first guy to play and record freeform music. First jazz pianist to play at Carnegie Hall. I mean, he had a lot of accolades, but he wasn't ready for prime time. You know, he was quite a crusty character, you know, from the old bebop days. And but he, you know, his lessons were really interesting. He'd have like 6 or 7 points. One of them might be, he'd say like, Joey, next week you got to do harmonic minors, harmonized in 6, you know, and I'd have to learn how to play. And this, mind you, I'm 17 years old, and I've got to go, okay, harmonic minor scale, I know what that is, you know, and then harmonized in 6. So that means you're playing the scale. You know what I mean? It was just like fry my brain just trying to get through it. And then of course I have to do it in every key. And he was blind, so he didn't give me any printed material. He'd say, well, you go out and find it yourself, you know. If I made a mistake during like that part of the lesson would be immediately over. $20 out the door. And that would be just point 1. The second point might be a scale, unharmonized. The third point might be, you know, minor 7 chords in every possible little position. And then it would be scat sing along with a solo, learn a melody, be able to improvise around it, and return to the melody. You know, it was this huge undertaking. But, I mean, those 2 months of lessons lasted me a lifetime.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I remember he said something to me that I thought was really funny, very prophetic. He said, you know, well, in his own way, he said, yeah, too bad, Joe. He said, maybe in about 15, 20 years you might play something really good, you know? That was his way of giving a compliment. Of course, when you're 17, it's like, that's the end of the world, you know? Because you want everything, like, right away. And, but almost to the day, you know, it's funny when I think about it, my accidental career as an instrumentalist was born, you know. That was really prophetic of him. I don't know if I've played anything worth playing yet, but I still think about, you know, his whole idea of just playing what you want to play. And the ethic of being a musician, he just had it to the highest level. To be a musician, to him, was to aspire to the greatest level of human achievement, and it was not to be taken lightly. Get the chord books, get a lot of small, specific chord books, play every chord in the book every day. That's the way I did it. Now, I would assume that someone more talented would be able to read the book once and get it together. My method was repetition, and then familiarity would then bring an understanding. So I looked at the book and I said, Joe Pass, I play, Black Sabbath in my band. What do I know about what Joe Pass is doing? But I knew he was great. I could tell just by my ear that he was great. So I said, well, I trust this man's idea, and I'm just going to learn how to play every chord in the book every day, and that's what I did. I just read it from the beginning to the end and put the book away, and then went back to playing Paranoid, or something. And then I just, after a while, I'd start jamming with someone, and I just think, some guy would say, oh, E minor 7, and I'd go, and they'd all look at me like, wow, where have you been? What have you been doing? Who taught you how to do that? And I'd say, I just made that up. That's funny. You got to get this book. So then I went back to a lot of the chord books that I had, and I started to look at it in a different way. It's almost like the way, people who are into religion constantly go back to their religion's book of scripture, and they read it over and over again, and they come back with a new understanding. And that, to me, that's what a lot of the music books are. Because although some of them are written correctly, which is they're written as a set of parameters that give you a certain result, there are some that are written, I think, incorrectly, which is these are the rules. And in my mind, there are no rules. There are just parameters that give you a particular result. There are no rules. There are rulers, perhaps. I think I used to say that to my students. And all you have to do is just get used to the tool, and you can use it for whatever you want, similar to measuring tape or anything. It just can give you a name for a length. It doesn't tell you how long or short to make what it is you're measuring. It's just saying, if it's that long, you can call it that, so you can categorize that idea or transmit it to somebody. But eventually, you have to build an opinion about music that's your own if you want to become successful being original.